Welcome. This is Non-Dual Meditation with Meister Eckhart. In this series, we practice non-dual meditation inspired by the teachings of Meister Eckhart, as specified in the condemnations against him. These condemnations were generated by an inquisition that occurred in the early 14th century. We are up to the 7th article of evidence against Meister Eckhart, and the 7th article reads, "Also, that he who prays for anything particular prays badly, and for something that is bad, because he is praying for the negation of good and the negation of God, and he begs that God be denied to him." We're going to review this article of evidence, this statement made by Meister Eckhart, and come to understand why he makes the statement. We'll review the statement because the way he organizes his statements sometimes can be a bit confusing. So, he's speaking to practitioners of godliness, and he is, of course, he is Meister Eckhart, and he is a highly sophisticated theologian who has really made the quantum leap into non-duality at a time when non-duality was seriously prohibited, still is today to some extent. And I'm going to read the statement once again, and let's think about him speaking to another priest who is working on developing his spirituality. "Also," he says to the priest, "he who prays for anything particular prays badly, and for something that is bad, because he is praying for the negation of good and the negation of God, and he begs that God be denied him." So, Meister Eckhart is responding to a very common practice, basically pleading with God for some type of benefit. The problem about this dual relationship, where God is the empowered being and the incarnated person is dependent upon that power, is the issue which Meister Eckhart has taken up in this statement, in this teaching. Meister Eckhart is a non-dualist. He has arrived at an understanding that the relative world is co-eternal with the infinite life, which births this field of infinite diversity, this field of drama, this field of life happening to us. So we experience life happening to us. We experience, if you will, God happening to us. This is the dual perspective. And here is where Meister Eckhart is encouraging non-duality. He is encouraging the priest to let go of that perspective in which he differentiates himself radically from God. And that's the problem that he is operating on right now. He wants the priest to modulate to non-dual awareness and truly experience communion with God. That is non-differentiation. God is no longer other in the non-dual perspective. It is true communion, not symbolic communion, but actual communion, the simultaneity of the infinite life and the relative life, the simultaneity of the Father and the Son, so to speak. So, when we practice pleading for God's grace and benefits, we lose our perspective of unity by degree. So this is what Meister Eckhart is pointing at. No doubt about it, he is suggesting that when we believe God as radically other than ourselves, we then are believing in the negation of God, who is everyone and everything. So this is quite a pill even today for us to swallow. And I will move into the 8th article, which is consistent with this perspective. Those who are not desiring possessions, or honors, or gain, or internal devotion, or holiness, or reward, or the kingdom of heaven, but who have renounced all this, even what is theirs, these people pay honor to God. So, now he is suggesting the relinquishment of seeking the kingdom of heaven, of seeking holiness, of seeking virtue. This is again the negation that these qualities are present, and he is also providing instruction about the modulation, the shifting into non-dual awareness, the meditative placement of attention, the non-dual meditative placement of attention, in which we suspend desire. We suspend our interest in gaining honor and social validation. We suspend wanting. We want for nothing when we are one with everything. And this is the perspective of the mystic. He is encouraging other priests to, if you will, step into, modulate into, shift into non-dual communion with the Godhead. This is difficult for a politically organized Catholic Church. The individual becomes a leader, and also becomes a person who has the capacity to change the culture. And of course, with the change of the culture, changes the status quo. So let's go further into the 9th article, which reads, recently, I considered whether there was anything I would take or ask from God. I shall take careful thought about this, because if I were to accept anything from God, I should be subject to him and below him as a servant or a slave, and he, in giving, would be as a master. We shall not be so in life everlasting. Well, this 9th article continues in this mindset. Again, suggesting the unity between the incarnated being and the infinite source of all being, the Godhead itself. So here again, Meister Eckhart is encouraging a perspective that is quite different from the conventional perspective of the Roman Catholic Church, which indeed encourages us to think that the Godhead is giving us something that we need to be grateful for, and of course, which is fine. However, we do not want to be subordinated by the Godhead, not in a non-dual perspective. The Catholic Church encouraged at that time, as it does actually today, the subordination as we become devoted to the ideal of the all-embracing Godhead. We have a tendency to organize an idea of God as being a very virtuous spirit that has little to do with evil, with sin, and with horror. Yet, Meister Eckhart has taken on an expanded perspective in which he accepts the fullness of the Godhead, which embraces all existence, and he recognizes himself to be one with God, and he is encouraging the interruption of practicing subordination to the Godhead. No doubt about it, Meister Eckhart is living in a democracy of God, very inconsistent with the values and cultural norms of the time, which sees God as a monarch, as a, if you will, a political head of the universe, and not the universe itself, which is remarkable that's the case. We see now in older cultures, for example, the Hindu culture, they have the comprehensive understanding of the Godhead, so that when somebody says, "I am God," they do not necessarily organize that person as being pathological and inflated. The idea that we identify as and with God in the Western culture generally results in doubt about us. We are quickly accused of being inflated. And of course, this is all very understandable. Why? Because non-duality is matured, and the human condition is in the process of maturation. I think we need to stop here. It continues even further. And what we're looking at is that Meister Eckhart will encourage us to identify as Christ, In other words, all being, the entire relative field, everything within it, is the firstborn of the Godhead, so to speak, and is in fact co-eternal and simultaneous with infinite being. So we're going to modulate into the meditative placement of attention. We take 3 deep breaths to provide us a shift in our affective state, which will support our ability to modulate to non-dual meditation. Let's remember the distinction between the dual and the non-dual. In the dual perspective, life is happening to us. God is happening to us. In the non-dual perspective, we are one with infinite being. Life is not happening to anyone in particular. Life is not happening to us. Life is just happening. Neither subject nor object. We suspend desire. We suspend differentiating ourselves from our environment, and we suspend differentiating ourselves from the Godhead. Let's begin with an expulsion through the throat. Get all the air out. Inhaling through the nose. Very big inhalation. Hold your breath. Hold the air out. There'll be 2 more. Relax completely. And so even now we begin to let go of conceptualizing and begin shifting into sensory awareness, suspending judgment. Let's get the air out. Inhale. Hold your breath. Hold. Let's modulate into non-dual meditation by coming to our senses. Listen closely. Listen closely to yourself. Suspending judgment. Letting go of self-consciousness. Letting go of the idea that life is happening to anyone. Let go of objectives, of hopes, of worry. Pick up every sound. Let God be God. And we can reflect on the Meister's remark, "We shall not be so in life everlasting. We shall not be slaves, subordinated by the Godhead in life everlasting, but be transformed into God." This is the nature of being. We will see in the coming articles that Meister Eckhart will continue to expand on his argument that all beings are the firstborn of the Godhead. Christ is the pervasive condition of the manifest universe of all being, inclusive of the virtuous and the vile. We're seeing an all-embracing formulation, conceptualization of the Godhead. Quite a different perspective. Interestingly, if Meister Eckhart had been in India, for example, his argument would not have resulted in such a stir. That culture understands the what they call the avatar, the incarnation, considerably better than our Western culture. Here in our Western culture, we see the closed relationship, you might say, between the Spirit, the Father, and the Son. You know, we're sort of out of that circle, and yet, you know, we are taught that we are the children of God, yet we're also taught that we're not, and we're sort of on probation. We have to behave well, otherwise we get slammed. And wonderful having you come and tune in to this difficult teaching. I encourage you to continue tuning in. We'll continue with the condemnations, continue our practice of non-dual meditation and contemplation of the teachings of Meister Eckhart. Well, tune in again, and thank you again for your participation.